Predicting the future is impossible. That doesn't mean I'm not going to try and do it. It's really fun to try and guess what's going to change over the next year. And with 2024 coming very soon, I figure now's a better time than ever to try and guess what the trends are going to be in the industry. This video is more focused on the dev world. If you're curious about everything from AR to iPhones to general tech trends, I actually have a second channel where I'll be posting a video for my 2024 tech predictions. But this is just about dev, so if you want to hear everything from AI to front-end trends to where I think JavaScript and servers are going to be and how I think AWS will slowly die, that's what this video is for. So without further ado, let's dive in. First, we should talk about JavaScript, because JavaScript certainly won't stop moving over this next year. 2023 was a wild year for JavaScript. We challenged everything from what frameworks we use to where those frameworks run to the actual runtimes they're running in, as well as challenging build tools too. So how do I think things are going to shake out over the next year? First off, I do expect a slight shift away from this crazy chaos. Like, as much as we love seeing change and as much as it fuels the channel and a lot of y'all being here, it's important that things start to stabilize. And I already am seeing a slight slowdown of the utter chaos as we figure out what a lot of these new patterns and paradigms enable. If we're talking about JavaScript, we have to talk about React. We kind of already know what React is working on. The big thing that we haven't seen just yet is React Forget. I have a video coming out very soon about it. Might already be out. The best I can TLDR it is that React will compile out an ideal output instead of you having to memoize and handle all of the weird edge cases around stable updates yourself. It should theoretically make React code much more performant without having to write code any differently. In fact, it will let you skip writing memoizations, skip writing use callback, and a lot of these additional hooks to make things more performant. We can just leave behind and the compiler will handle it for us, which is super exciting, but it's still very, very early, hasn't been released at all yet. So we're keeping an eye out for when that happens. I think this is going to be a huge win, but what we're going to see is both people adopting it and finding a lot of success with it, as well as a lot of developers who might not even be React devs tooling on us a ton. Because,
oh my God, React is so slow that you need a compiler to fix it? What the hell? Why don't you just use a real framework like Svelte?
We're going to see a lot of that, and that's fine. The result will still be way faster code and way easier to maintain code bases. So I'm excited for it, and I'm predicting a lot of pushback as soon as that ships. Speaking of pushback, we have to talk about React Native a little bit because things are about to get real spicy. First, we have static Hermes, which is a compiler for React Native and JavaScript as a whole. It takes your JavaScript and runs it in an assembly layer. So you're compiling down much more efficient code. I have a whole video dedicated to static Hermes if you're curious, and I'm very excited for a future where our JavaScript is as fast as equivalent C or assembly. It's a really cool project, and I'm hyped that both Meta and Amazon have teamed up to build something as special as they have. One of the biggest benefits of React Native has always been the over-the-air update layer. Since the JavaScript that explains what your code does is just a file that can be fetched from a server, you can update a large portion of your app without having to push an update through the App Store. Obviously, if you use this to sneak features underneath Apple, you're going to get banned. But if you use it for bug fixes, for layout fixes, for one-off, changing the background color for a holiday type stuff, they're not going to care. And it lets you and your team move significantly faster, both for addressing bugs and shipping one-off changes. It's so nice to have that level of control to the point where companies like Facebook and Google have built their entire mobile application layer around server-defined user interfaces. When you're at a certain scale, you can't trust that all your users are on the most up-to-date version of your app, which makes it more important than ever that you have a way to ship slight changes to your UI without having to update the binary on their device. Imagine Facebook wants to try out a new newsfeed element type, like they have a new post type, but half their users are on an old version of the app. Well, if the server can describe to the app how that should be shaped, things get a lot easier. This is why I'm excited about React Native having server component support, because now that granularity is at a component level. I can, when you fetch a component, make changes to how its UI is structured without having to update your binary, either the JavaScript side or the native side. That idea of like over-the-air updates every time you fetch data from the server is so exciting to me, and I can't wait to see it ship in real apps in the near future. Both React and React Native have really promising futures, from their new compiler steps to server components and what those enable. I'm not quite sure where Next is going to fit in this future. We'll get to that when we talk more about the server side stuff, because I want to talk more about other web frameworks. Last year, I actually gave Solid Framework of the Year. The growth I had seen in both the community and the library itself were incredible, and I'm really excited to see what Ryan and team do with Solid. They just shipped the newest beta version for Solid Start, which is their alternative to Next, and they seem like they learned all the right lessons from what React and server components are doing. They even have their own equivalent of Use Server. That's super exciting. On the Svelte side, you probably already know this, but Rich and a couple of the other core contributors to Svelte work at Vercel now, which is huge, both because they're funded to work on Svelte full time, but also because a lot of the primitives and things that Vercel has built for Next can also be used by Svelte. In fact, Svelte had edge rendering working before Next did, which was huge, and it let me play with the new Vercel edge stuff way earlier than I might have been able to otherwise. Svelte's a super promising framework, and with the recent acceptance that their way of doing state management with magic let equals bindings doesn't scale great, especially once you start building libraries, and their move to use runes, which are a little more React and solid influenced and inspired, Svelte's looking more and more promising. I still don't love the syntax, and I really hate single file components, but I'm excited to see what they do. And on top of that, we have SvelteKit, which has made a ton of progress. There are so many ideas in SvelteKit that I genuinely really love, from the prefixes at the start of file names when they're involved in your routing, to the proper separation with code gen just as a step to get your type definitions over the wire. It's really cool stuff, and I am excited to see what they do. I personally, if I had to pick one, I would lean towards Solid just because it seems to have copied a little more of the structure of applications that I miss so much from React. And I really hate having one file represent a component. It just takes away so much flexibility. If I have a button that is being reused and I want to break it out quick, just above the file, or if I have some complicated markup that I don't want clogging up the little bit of my JSX that I'm in right now, the ability to break that out in a component whenever I feel like without leaving the file is just something I'm personally not willing to give up yet. I do expect both frameworks to have significant adoption over the next year, and I don't think either will get close to where React or Vue are, but I do think their fan bases will continue growing and will continue getting louder over the next year. I think Svelte is much more for Vue people and Solid is much more for React people, but it's so good to see both of these sides having better options over time. Really exciting stuff. But what about non-JavaScript frameworks? We should talk about Wasm a bit because I don't think it's going anywhere next year. I know we're always talking about React being killed by Rust-based frameworks, but it hasn't really happened. I think a lot of the wars around web performance are not the most well thought, and even React's performance isn't that bad, especially with all of the new stuff happening with server components and Forget. Wasm-based frameworks have a ton of potential for performance, but not in how quickly they can update the DOM, because that binding is still done through JavaScript most of the time. The magic of Wasm is the ability to do heavy computations that you don't normally have the ability to do in JavaScript, like really complex math for rasterizing an image or applying a filter or a mask or those types of things that something like Figma would do, not something that we would do building the traditional web app. And as such, when I see all of these new ways of building Rust-based web applications, I cringe a tiny bit. I think the work being done is incredible. Like the work done on Leptos is really, really cool. Seeing somebody learn from Solid and apply that to Rust in the browser. But the size of the binaries is still pretty bad. The performance wins aren't there. And the flexibility of a language like Rust doesn't really mesh great with the magic of composability on the front end. I just don't see it happening anytime soon. I could be wrong on this one. I could be wrong about everything here. That's obvious enough, but I just do not expect Wasm to have a moment next year. Last but not least, I think it's important we talk about the bun question. Where is bun going? Well, I've been using bun quite a bit more, and I'm pretty excited. I think for bun to find success, it has to focus less on generic support all of Node and more on supporting specific, really, really powerful use cases like Next and bundling within the Next ecosystem. Because right now, we have no idea when TurboPack is going to ship, but we do know bun is really fast. And the more we can bridge that gap and take advantage of what bun enables, the better. I also think Bun's new APIs and built-in standard library stuff, like the SQLite stuff and their own file reading things, are going to cause as many problems as they solve. It is nice having a better API and syntax, and it's certainly nice having SQLite that's way faster. But as soon as you need to run that somewhere else, you're screwed. And it's been rare for me that I write code with the intent to run it in Bun, that I don't eventually want to run it in something else too. So as exciting as Bun is, I think the focus for Bun will slowly shift towards both Node compatibility and building compat for specific use cases and frameworks. That's all I have to say about JavaScript for now, because we need to start talking about servers. 2023 was a wild year for servers. From the surge of HTMX to server components becoming more and more the norm, to people taking things like Remix and Solid Start and SvelteKit all much more seriously. I think right now we're in a huge, huge shift around the server. The core of this shift is serverless. I think serverless technologies are going to change how we build. Shouldn't say I think that. I know that because it's already happening. The magic of serverless is similar to the magic of components, where we're thinking a lot less about how all of these things connect and the crazy relationships between them, making sure things are deployed and provisioned correctly, that we have enough servers running for our traffic. Instead, you just make a little thing, and however you use it, as long as the top is defined correctly, it just works. serverless got me back into building full stack applications because I was so tired of Kubernetes and Terraform and all the craziness around keeping these things up and running. With serverless, I didn't have to think about any of that. It removes a ton of complexity, and it's better supported than ever with tools like Vercel. I am really hyped about what serverless has enabled for me, and I'm seeing the rest of the industry take it on more and more. While it is more expensive than running a server, if you have fixed traffic that you well understand, as soon as your traffic gets spiky or you have a huge surge you didn't expect, serverless saves you so much trouble. And I don't think the industry will shift away from it anytime soon. I have seen more and more people excited about serverless-like technologies, like what they're working on with Flame over at Fly.io. I have a whole video about that if you're curious. I'll link it in the description. But that mindset of not thinking about where and how your servers are deployed, rather writing code and trusting your infrastructure to put the functions in the right place and run your code for you, is just so much easier. In the same way, we're not managing memory ourselves when we write JavaScript. We shouldn't be managing deployments ourselves when we write server-side JavaScript either. It also solves so many performance problems, but I'm going to get too much heat if I talk about that. So we'll ignore it for now because there's other things happening on the server that we need to talk about. Specifically, we need to talk about the move away from JSON. Again, I have a whole video about this, but the quick TLDR is that JSON's not the best format for sending data to the client. If you have a client and that client is rendering a user interface, sending it JSON so that it has the right data to then generate a UI itself is a lot of steps that might not be necessary. And there are very, very, very few JSON APIs that actually return the minimal set of data the client needs. Usually, when the server is returning data to the client, the server is returning all of the data that endpoint might ever need to serve to any user, and you're rendering a small portion of it. On top of that, you have to ship all of the JavaScript for all of the permutations of that data that you might need to render. Again, to go back to the React Native example, if you have a new type of newsfeed post and you send that to an older client, they can't do anything with that. So you have to send every type of post they might render as JavaScript to them ahead of time. The magic of server components, as well as new things like HTMX, is that they've rejected this idea that JSON and massive data fetches are the right way to render UI. As powerful as client-side rendering is, client-side rendering a JavaScript blob into content is less great. And if the server could, instead of sending JSON, send markup that represents what the client should render, that's much, much better in the majority of cases. Yes, theoretically, the HTML that you render could be bigger than the JSON data you're sending, but it's not bigger than the JavaScript you're sending as well to handle all of those permutations. So in almost all of these cases, it's going to be a significantly better experience, both for users and, importantly, for developers, because the server controlling the UI is a really, really powerful paradigm. There's a concept from the HTMX guys called hate OAS, which is hypermedia as the engine of application state. This is the concept of using HTML to describe the state of the client rather than JSON and client-side state management. I'm not saying client-side state management is bad. There's a lot of places where it's good, but if the server can reasonably know the state of things, and it's important for the server to have that information, especially if you're like going to refresh the page and expect things to still be there, this model makes a ton of sense. And with server components, React is leaning more and more into this direction as well, where the server sends updated markup to the client instead of JSON telling the client what to do from there. This is absolutely the future, and I'm so excited to see where it goes. I also just saw my favorite dumb comment, but doesn't this cost the server more money? No. For very obvious reasons. If I'm fetching JSON from the server on my client, then I need to fetch multiple times because I have to fetch for the initial state. I then have to fetch for whatever additional data is necessary. And chances are I'm fetching more than once. Since I have to fetch data more than once, I now have to re-authenticate myself more than once on the server. Because if you're making requests from a server, there's a high chance those need to be authenticated. On top of that, you probably need to make an additional database connection or a lot of other additional things. If you compare one request to something that renders HTML versus one request to something that sends JSON, yes, the one that renders the HTML is going to be slightly slower, but we're not comparing one to one. We're comparing the one request that sends the initial HTML and then streams in the rest to a JSON request that sends some data that the client then realizes it needs more. So it makes 3 more requests. It renders that, realizes it needs more. And you end up making like 17 plus requests. Just go to the Twitch homepage if you want to see this. When we compare server rendering to client rendering, this cost argument makes no sense because there's an exponentially smaller number of requests being made per user and per page load when you're using these new server rendering patterns. And if you only have to authenticate the user once instead of 20 times for every request, that costs way less. Period. We wouldn't be done talking about servers if we didn't talk about authentication a little bit. And I think the auth wars are going to get real spicy. Obviously, I'm sponsored by Clerk, so take this with a grain of salt, but this video is not sponsored. I am. So know that this is my honest opinion, even if you can say I'm biased due to who's paying me. Auth is easy to get hard to get right. And as someone who has built Auth a number of times in their services, it's easy to set up. And then once you have problems, things get really painful really quick. I have been incredibly surprised at how good my experience is using Clark specifically. And I'm seeing more and more options come up every day. Auth0's kind of become less interesting to the industry, but Supabase's Auth is great. And I've seen more and more people excited to use that and promote it. We also have WorkOS creating a whole toolkit around their open source components for their Auth layer that looks really cool. AuthKit is exciting as hell. Clark is a great product regardless, and their recent updates to their pricing tier are huge, and it's made the service incredibly cheap for us. We went from $100-something a month down to under $25 with the recent changes. We'll talk a bit more about Auth in a little bit when I talk about how I expect the rest of the industry to restructure, but I don't think Auth is the only thing that we're going to see this type of resurgence and significant change in. So we should talk about the market, because as fun as the tech is, the way that we use it, adopt it, and sell it is even more important, and I also think is going to change way more over this next year. First, we should talk about content. Obviously, I'm going to keep getting hotter. I mean, look at how ugly I was at the beginning of the year and look at how great I look now. Who knows how incredible things are going to be in a year. I also will have more subscribers because you're going to subscribe if you haven't already. Half of you haven't subscribed for some reason. Like, come on, I'm making so many of these videos and you can't hit that one button. It's right there. It's free to click. Come on, guys. Yeah. Less about me, though, more about the industry. It's clear developer influencing works. One of my favorite numbers to show off is the age demographics on my channel. I want you to quickly guess what percentage of my audience do you think is 25 or older? Just throw a number out there. You guess, since I'm a dev YouTuber making content for noobs, obviously it's going to be like 20%, maybe 30%. Let's see some numbers in chat quick before I give away the answer. What percentage of my audience do you think is 25 or older? We've had one person get somewhat close. And here we are. Oh, I guess all time it's a tiny bit lower, but it's about 73%. Recently it's actually been higher, as high as like 80%, which is nuts. This is a very old audience for YouTube. This isn't people putting fake numbers in. This is a very significant trend. There are a surprisingly small number of younger devs in my community. This content is valuable to people who are 25 and older primarily, because my videos kind of suck if you haven't been programming for a while, because I wanted to make videos for people like myself. The reason I made this channel was I left my job at Twitch and I missed having deep engineering conversations with people that I learned from and looked up to. I wanted to have these deep technical convos you used to have at something like lunch at your office. And what I found was a combination of people who, due to COVID or other reasons, missed having these types of conversations, but also that a lot of people didn't have the opportunity at all before. There's a lot of developers who didn't have other developers around them to talk about these things, be it a kid in India who's the most talented dev in their class, or somebody working remote in the middle of nowhere that just doesn't know any other programmers. My community became one of the best places to have these deep technical conversations. And that exists because I wanted it so badly. I missed having these convos. I made a channel to do it. And it turns out there's literally hundreds of thousands of other people who wanted to do the same. 5,000 new ones every day watch one of my videos for the first time. It's incredible. I am so lucky to be able to be part of a community like this, much less the face that's leading it for some reason. And I am really thankful that I've had that opportunity. And I think we're seeing a huge shift in the industry, not just because of me, but because more people are realizing what I realized, which is you can have these conversations with these new mediums. You can talk about these deep technical things on YouTube, and it's a really good experience. I have been pumped with the cool stuff we've been able to do. Everything from the success of the T3 stack to the huge conversations I've been able to start and push on the channel, to type safety becoming a normal conversation, to full stack development becoming more and more common. Being able to be part of these waves and conversations is incredible. And I'm so lucky to have that. And I think this is only going to get bigger over the next year. Every day, I still talk to people who saw that I was a YouTuber and assumed I'm just another guy making videos for noobs to learn how to code. And then they go watch one of my videos and they're blown away and they end up binging the channel. I am so hyped to hear that because we're breaking that assumption, that expectation that YouTube dev means for noobs has been eroded over the last year. And I honestly think by the end of next year, it will be gone. I'm not saying there won't still be content for noobs. In fact, I think there will be even more of it. But this idea that a YouTuber dev is always a noob is quickly going away. And a huge shout out to Prime and everybody else who's been making awesome videos lately for helping push this narrative, because I was so tired of these assumptions. It was also weird for me because I'm an open source maintainer and I've been doing programming for well over a decade now. And I was mostly known for my open source contributions up until the YouTube blew up. It was so strange going from a dev that was pretty well respected for their engineering prowess to being written off because I have a YouTube channel. It's actually been pretty eye-opening to me seeing these developers who I assumed had good intentions immediately write me off because I was popular. More importantly, the developers who I've looked up to for my entire career reaching out because they were so hyped on what I was doing because it felt like a real dedicated open source engineer was making content for them. And I love that. I really think that trend will continue. The other side of this trend is how DevRel works, because I think DevRel, as we currently understand it, is entirely dead. The idea of a person you hire to make crappy TikToks and YouTube videos and go to a bunch of conferences to show the other DevRels, it's a meme at this point. And it's sad because I know so many DevRels that work really hard to build community and help developers understand the value of the thing their company is building. There are some really incredible examples. People like Lee Robb, who are so deeply ingrained in the community that I can't imagine how this would work without them. But there's also a lot of companies that have an 8-person DevRel team that basically just hosts conferences for nobody and posts videos that get 10 plays. And that's not going to work. If companies keep poorly copying what the rest of the industry is doing, it's going to continue failing. It worked a little bit when they copied the Tech Talks bit, which is how DevRel kind of started. When Tech Talks started being a real way to get new users, DevRels started to take them over. When YouTube started to be a real way to get users, DevRels poorly tried to copy it. And this is the concern I have. I don't think companies can do what people like Prime and I are doing. I think the role of DevRel is going to fundamentally shift away from directly making content and trying to be the face of their company and more towards direct outreach to the right people. I don't think a good DevRel is a person making YouTube videos. I think a good DevRel is somebody who is part of the community of the people who make those YouTube videos. Somebody who's in my chat, hanging out, providing useful info, and slowly getting me to consider the thing that they work for as a legitimate option. If you want to hear more about my thoughts on DevRel, I'm actually deep in making a course all about it. devrel.fyi. Hopefully, the landing page will be up by the time this video is live. You should definitely take a look at it. It's primarily focused on companies, so if you're an individual, don't buy this. If you work at a job where this could be useful, maybe try and get them to include it in the education budget, because I don't want people buying this, I want companies buying this. Because this info is primarily useful to companies, because the way companies market themselves has to change. Developers are tired of being marketed to. This is a huge trend I've noticed over the last year. Previously, there were so few options as a developer that basically any marketing strategy would work, because developers were in need of better tools. If you found any way to tell people about those better tools, they would try them out and use them. Now that there are way more options for tools, developers feel overwhelmed with the choice. And more, these options are just being hammered into their faces without any understanding of their problems. The marketing strategies that worked 10 years ago just don't work anymore. The way you get developers to consider what you're doing is by understanding their problems and presenting solutions in a digestible, exciting way, as simply as possible. But in order to do all of that, you have to be there and be involved. I think we're seeing this start to happen with tools like Drizzle and HTMX killing it on Twitter. Just absolutely slaughtering. It is so exciting to see these companies and these open source projects recognizing that success on these platforms isn't constantly posting updates on your new features. It's being part of the community and having some fun. You have to be around before you can be adopted. And I feel like people skip that part way too much. Again, course coming soon if you want to learn more about all this stuff. I don't want to make the whole video about DevRel and marketing. So that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about trends in the market. One trend I've noticed that's really exciting to me is the unbundling of AWS. Amazon Web Services has been the standard for industry for quite a while now, and for good reason. It's really reliable, really scalable, and for the most part, fairly priced. It's also more chaotic than ever to set up and manage and deal with. Managing your AWS is becoming an industry of its own, and I've seen more and more companies that are literally just there to manage your AWS for you. I think we're going to see two trends, both of which have already started. One is the unbundling of AWS, where more and more companies will take specific features in AWS and specific services you might use and make better integrated versions for subsets of the market. One example of this is Upload Thing. We saw that S3 was hard to set up and way too hard to set up right for most full stack web developers. We built Upload Thing to set up most of those pieces ahead of time. So you can just install our library, define who can upload, render a component, and you're done. It was never that easy to do before, and it was really hard to do this without introducing security issues of some form. And we went out of our way to make something really incredible there. We're seeing this more and more with everything from Clerk to PlanetScale to all the other fantastic sponsors of this channel, working hard to take individual parts of the AWS experience and make something way better for a subset of the market. I don't think any of these companies are going to take on all of AWS because AWS has a solution for 95+% of developer problems. If AWS covers a theoretical 95% of the market, I don't think a company like Vercel is trying to cover that same space. They're going to take 20 to 30% and make them something 10 times better. And that's what I expect to see more and more of, is these specialized products that take a subset of the market and make something significantly better. But what's the adoption going to look like? Because all these companies are already huge. Why would they adopt something that small? This is where my spiciest take comes in. People who know me mostly from the investor or VC world will have probably heard this take from me already. My expectation for the future is less massive multi-billion-dollar companies, more smaller focused companies with 100 or less person teams. I really don't see a future where we have more and more Amazons being formed. My expectation is parts of the market that these big companies have will be really hard to maintain and make great product for, because the size of the team makes it hard to move that quickly. AWS could never make the best solution for Next, because Next moves so much faster than AWS ever could. And for that reason, I expect specialized solutions to start forming. It doesn't happen even outside of dev. We've kind of seen this with the Mastodon trend, where individual servers and locations are being built for specific interest groups. I think we'll see more and more applications focused on the needs of specific people, because it's easier to build applications than it's ever been before. Maybe 5 to 10 years ago, making a tool specifically for web developers, or specifically for React Native developers, or specifically for game devs using this particular engine might not have made sense, because you have to hire a bunch of people, do a bunch of work to get a small set of the market. But if you can make that small set something way better with a way smaller team, using modern tools and practices to develop faster, it makes way more sense to do that. And as more and more of these tools start to exist, the pieces you need to do this yourself are more and more available. I know that I've been able to build things myself in days that previously would have taken me months, if not years, with a team to do, because these tools have gotten so good. I also think the way these companies are split is going to change fundamentally. I already saw this when I was at Amazon and Twitch, where instead of having a big back-end team, a big platform team, and a big front-end team, we had vertical slices, where we had the chat team, had the back end, the front end, the safety, the product, all for chat. We had the safety team, which was actually 3 separate vertical teams, where we had the safety tooling team building things like ModView, which had its own backend and front end devs. We had the safety internal tools team, which had its own backend and front end devs. Then we had our proactive detection team, which was doing all the crazy AI ML stuff to try and prevent people from doing bad things on Twitch ahead of time. This vertical split allows for individual teams to own the thing that they're solving from top to bottom and almost operate like a mini startup within the company. When your teams are split up more horizontally and you have a big front end team and a big back end team, figuring out who owns what and making feature changes is just a massive drag. And I do not think companies that structure themselves in that way are going to maintain their success over the next year. This is a longer term trend. I don't think 1 year is going to see a huge change here, but I do expect more and more of these vertical slices, both a vertical slice company as well as vertical slices within a company, to become more and more popular over time. And I'm very excited to see the impact that this has on the industry as a whole. Enough about vertical teams. We need to talk about who's on these teams, because the job market is more chaotic than it's ever been. As teams get smaller and more focused on individual products, their need to own and deliver is higher than it's ever been. Junior developers are good at a lot of things. Ownership is not one of them. And as companies no longer have these massive teams where 3 engineers might not be as productive as the other 7, but they can slowly keep up and learn over time, that structure just doesn't exist as much anymore. And it's going to be less and less common. So the number of roles available to junior developers is going to keep going down. The world of companies having a job board with like 50 junior positions you could cold apply to a bunch of and eventually get a gig from is just not real anymore. Cold applications are not great. Because of the state of the industry and the combination of these trends, as well as the zero interest rate era being over, companies are looking for trust more than ever before. And junior devs are very, very short on trust. You just don't have enough experience in the industry and enough accolades or previous coworkers to give us confidence in your work. So if you're trying to get into the industry, you need to find ways to build trust. I have a whole video about this coming out soon. It might actually be out by the time this video is live. Keep an eye out for that one, because it's very helpful if you're trying to get a job to better understand how the other side is looking when they make these decisions. And it's easy to get demoralized if you don't have a better idea of how the industry is working right now. So I expect the number of job opportunities, especially for juniors, to keep going down. I don't think the amount of opportunities for senior plus devs will, though. I'll tell you, as someone who's recruiting for a lot of companies, very few are asking for junior devs. All of them are asking for senior to principal devs for almost any role, be it backend, front end, mobile, full stack, DevRel, content writing. All of these companies are looking for senior devs because they don't want to do the teaching and take the risk inherent to that anymore. So that's a harsh reality, but it's a trend I do expect to get worse well before it gets better. There are still more jobs than there are devs, but there are more junior devs than there are junior jobs. And now for the last prediction. AI. Before we get to that, I want to remind you that I have a video on the second channel all about tech trends, not dev trends. So if you want to hear about mobile phones, virtual reality, and all the crazy things happening in hardware and software, go there. Really cool video. Anyways, AI, what's happening? AI is tiring. I am really excited for the things that AI technologies enable, but the conversation has gotten quite frustrating. The thing I've seen that has been the most painful is this idea of more and more AI companies. I don't think AI companies are going to survive through 2024. AI is a really powerful way for us to augment how people do things. And OpenAI and companies like it are going to do great. The providers of these technologies have a very happy path to success. What I don't see is tooling companies building entirely around AI for user products, finding too much success over the next year. If every company is trying to make it easier to write code via AI, there's a feature like Copilot that's going to squash them. For every company trying to do really good image generation with AI, Photoshop adds one feature and kills them. I think the future isn't AI companies, it's AI features in existing companies' products. At this point, the vast majority of us have used Copilot, and I think Copilot's still the golden example of AI done right. It takes something we're already doing, which is writing code in our editor, and uses AI to make us slightly more effective as we do that. That is really powerful. And even though I didn't think I would like it going in, I've been blown away with the experience I have had using Copilot. It's made programming more fun and more efficient. Although some of the code it writes is jank and I don't notice until it breaks something. It's a huge efficiency win. And most importantly, it doesn't get in my way or require me to change the tools I'm using entirely. Again, if we compare this to other options in the industry, the expectation is this whole separate product or ecosystem will be moved to just to get these new AI benefits. I'll promise you something. I'm not changing the photo editing software I use just because another one adds AI to it or because some other AI first solution exists. The winners aren't going to be the companies that create new AI tools from scratch. The winners are going to be the people who build AI into their existing products the best and most effectively. And we're already seeing this with everyone from Adobe to Notion to GitHub and Microsoft, meaningfully integrating AI into their products rather than selling AI as its own product. I think that covers it. 2024 is looking really, really exciting. Clearly, I had a lot to say about it. This video is like almost an hour of raw recording time. So sorry to my editor. Appreciate you a ton. Definitely keep an eye on the channel over this next year because we have some really exciting stuff coming. What do you think I got wrong? Because there's a lot of hot takes in here, and I'm sure you guys are going to disagree with a number of them. So let me know in the comments what you agree with, what you disagree with, and what you think is going to change over the next year. Appreciate you guys a ton as always. Check out the video where I talk all about the tech of 2024 here. See you in the next one. Peace, nerds.